Marie Curie once said, "Nothing in life is to be feared. It's only to be understood. Now is the time to understand more so that we may fear less." Keep this in mind today as we dive into a very, very interesting topic and one that I think is very relevant. We know that geopolitics is very important, but there's other things too that really contribute to the way that our world works. And one of those things is scientific breakthroughs. And this last year, 2022, was full of them. In fact, each one of these on its own is a game changer. So stay tuned to the end because we have 10 really important scientific breakthroughs for you. My name is Elizabeth Ann Stewart.
And my name is Dr. Ross Stewart.
And you're watching Geopolitics and Conflict.
You know, coming up with this list of 10, what a challenge. There are literally thousands of scientific breakthroughs that are impacting the lives of everyone in America and virtually everyone on the planet.
Absolutely.
All the way from what's going on with the genome to what's going on with energy. Let's dive in.
Okay, so number one on this list, although it was very hard to choose a number one, but number one on this list is the human genome has been completed. Okay, this is a really big deal. Why is this a big deal? So the Human Genome Project originally, let's see, I've got an article for you guys. So the Human Genome Project initially in 2003 covered about 92% of the human genome. The problem is there was another 8% that they had not yet covered. And it took a bunch of scientific breakthroughs basically to fill the gaps in technology to be able to do this. So do you want to talk about who did it really quickly while I get this?
And let's talk about the importance of this. What we now have is the ability to perhaps even reproduce organs. We can diagnose much better. We can start putting correlational material together in terms of weaknesses, strengths, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And the next step in the development of this is something called telomeres, ACE and telomeres. Let me do a very brief description of this.
Okay.
And when you take a gene, a sequence of this, and they're going to replicate, what happens is they split apart like this.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and then they go and they take the available amino acids that are floating around them, and they replicate themselves. But every time, and a telomerase is an enzyme that goes through and cuts through this,
Mm-hmm.
so it breaks them apart. Every time that telomerase does that, it stops and doesn't complete the gene. So let's say 72 times,
Mm-hmm.
because it's about once a year,
Mm-hmm.
we have 72 less genes to express our superior health.
Yeah. And that is called
aging. And one of the big benefits of doing this kind of research is dissolving that cap.
Yep.
And so what the real hope here is that we can reverse this aging process and make the entire gene available. What does that mean in terms of how long you get to live and how healthy you are?
Well,
unknown, but at least it's promising.
Well, and I think that may be, along with genetic disorders and the things that go along with gene expression. And we've even, in sci-fi, we've even explored mentally, at least, what does it mean to be able to actually mess with your genes? But I think you're bringing up maybe the number one application down the line, of course, and that is the number one disease, and that is aging.
Also, certain virus sequences that can go in and repair damaged or inappropriate parts of the genome.
Absolutely.
And this is all predicated on we know what's there.
So we know what's
this
there.
This is so exciting in terms of human potential, in terms of human health, in terms of human longevity. Who knows what we'll be able to impact? It's enormously important.
And absolutely.
And that's why we selected it as number one.
That's why it's number one. Okay, number two, fusing energy. This is also a very exciting one, producing more energy from a fusion experiment than was put into it.
One of the things we heard over and over again is fusion, cold fusion is the future. Well, cold fusion probably isn't going to happen, but fusion, because it's remarkably less expensive, and it's non-polluting. Now, the challenge is how much technology has to go into this thing because at the core of it is temperatures that are hotter than the sun.
Right.
Whoa, okay. Well, that's a lot of technology to control that.
So let's dive into it a little bit.
Go ahead.
So the experiment took place at the National Ignition Facility in Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory in California. So why is it a historic achievement? So what they said is over 60 years, thousands of people have contributed to it, and it took a lot of vision to get them there. So nuclear fusion is described as the holy grail of energy. It's a process that the sun uses and other stars also use. So it's the opposite of nuclear fission. So that's where heavy atoms are actually split apart. Fission is the technology that we normally use right now in nuclear power stations. But the process also creates an enormous amount of waste. And that's where we get the nuclear waste that has to be disposed of in a particular way, but that sits around forever and is very bad for the environment and very, very bad for us. And it gives out radiation for a really long time. So nuclear fusion produces a lot more energy and only a very small amount of short-lived radioactive waste. So that's a pretty big deal. And it also produces no greenhouse gases. So this is potentially with, quite a bit more research and quite a bit more implementation, but this is potentially what can change going forward, what can change the way that human beings utilize electricity.
One of the things that we keep hearing is it's still a long way off.
Right.
I've heard it'll probably be here by 2050, but here's the thing about science. One breakthrough, and it's here now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and these things are unpredictable when they're going to come. They have a scientific breakthrough that's actually an accident, but hey, it worked, and now we know something we didn't know before. And fission we got, fusion could be here relatively soon.
Well, it's
Could
here
be.
now. In a way, it's here now. And there's that thing about the 4-minute mile, right? So
Oh, yeah.
nobody could run a 4-minute mile. They said it was impossible. And then one guy did it. And then one guy did it. And then a lot of people did it. And now it's a pretty average, it's standard. High school kids can do it. But it took one person being able to complete the 4-minute mile to be able to make it viable for everybody else.
And this kind of breakthrough could happen with fusion.
Yes, this is the kind of breakthrough that is very possible. Okay, falling sperm counts.
This is really quite a serious issue.
It is very serious, actually.
I think we did a show sometime recently about population decline.
Yeah.
And this is really a very big topic because there's so many contributing factors to it. But it is a serious problem. I think it's down 62%, some outrageously high number.
Okay, so let me share this with you guys because I followed this actually for a very long time because it is health. Let's see. Where is this article? Okay. So here's the deal with this. I followed this for kind of a long time. And one of the big scary things about this is not only that sperm count is reducing this substantially, but what does that mean in terms of overall health? What does that mean for overall human health? Because now the thing about this is it's not that we didn't know the sperm count was falling before this last year, but the original scientists who did this sort of research study on sperm count over the last 50 years, they came back and they did another set of research on the last 7 years because that had been, it had been a while. It had been sort of old research. And the old research basically said that 1% per year was the amount that the sperm count was declining. And the scary part is that since they redid this data, they looked at the data only collected since the year 2000, and the decline was more than double what it had been in the previous years. So whereas the decline is I think it was since 1972, the decline was only 1.616%, which is a lot. That's a huge decline on
It
its own.
is.
But since the year 2000, they looked at that data, and that data was a decline of almost more than twice as much. So you're looking at a decline from the year 2000 to now of 2.64% per year. This is not per decade. This is not per generation. This is per year. So that means our health is declining so rapidly. And we do see this, we see people that are passing away far earlier than they should, very, very young. I think Lisa Marie Presley died very recently
At 54.
at 54, which is very, very
I saw a
young.
recent picture of her and she looked dramatically unhealthy.
Well,
Okay, well, it added up. And
but we're looking at this, right? So we're looking at what are the factors that are causing this level of decline, because this is, we often think of infertility with women, but this is causing massive infertility with men also. One of the things the study also looked at, which was very important, is it's not just in the Western world. This decline is actually around the globe. Because one of the things that was missing from the previous set of research is, Africa, the Asias, China, some of the other parts, so the non-Western world, the Eastern world, and so they took a look at that and they found that the decline is global. So these researchers also actually went into some of the reasons that they really think that this is happening, and one of the reasons is plastics. So specifically phthalates in plastic, causing severe endocrine disruption. So, we're looking at population decline. We're not just looking at the conscious effort for people to have less children, but the ability to have less children, or lessening the ability to have children. And the reality is, I think you watching, if you are of child-making age, you probably want to have the choice. And you probably want to have the health. So it's a massive indicator in a huge decline in health and a rapid decline in health.
2 data points. One is the vast, vast, vast majority of infertile couples is not the woman. It's the male is not producing healthy enough sperm to impregnate her.
Yeah.
The second thing is, this was predicted in 1938 with the Pottinger cat study.
Yes. Okay. Say a little bit more about that.
Briefly,
Mm-hmm.
An MD named Pottinger ran a study of 900 cats. Big study. And it was, I read his book, and it was amazingly good science.
Mm-hmm.
And what he found is he'd had three groups, and it was all diet related. The healthy cats had largely raw meat.
Right.
Their sperm count, their health, their genetics passed on perfectly. The second was a mixed diet, and they started showing mutations,
Mm-hmm.
jaw formation, erratic behavior. Then they gave them synthetic food.
Mm-hmm.
And here we saw, eventually they died out because they became sterile. And so it was all diet related.
Yep.
And we take a look at the degradation of the American diet, where so many people recommend sugary stuff for breakfast.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just abomination in terms of what human beings really need to thrive.
Absolutely. And if you do some research into the food pyramid, when the food pyramid came out, a lot of this started to get substantially worse. And this is a personal story from our lives, but my grandfather, your father, grew up on a farm. And so when he bought produce, he didn't even pay attention to organic or any of that, because growing there was just one way. It was just the produce that came off the farm. And it was interesting watching him as he got older and older. First of all, he lived well into his 90s.
98.
And he was cognitively sharp. At 98, he was cognitively sharp. And very healthy. And up into his 90s, he was trimming his own hedges and cutting his own grass. And I mean, he was very, very healthy and fit and active, even well into his 90s. But when he bought produce, even as an older adult, it didn't even occur to him that there were different ways, like that what organic was or any of that, because he wasn't raised with it. And here we are paying attention. We have to pay attention to what food we eat, because what's available to us is primarily so bad for us that we have to make the active choice to choose something healthy. Whereas he just had whatever there was to eat, and that was food, healthy, fresh food. Okay, so the next one is also very, very cool. All right, this one, man, is one of the most interesting ones. So dead organs were actually revived and showed signs of repair. So
This is beyond comprehension,
mhm,
because we have defined death as it's over.
right.
These things cannot be resurrected. And what the researchers found is they could actually resurrect portions of organs.
Yeah.
So it has so many implications in terms of someone who is dying because one of the organs is dying.
Mhm.
Well, when that organ's gone, you happen to go with it, unless this program is initiated. So we're going to,
Mhm.
if this works out the way we think it's going to, what that means is people who have a dying heart, a dying liver, dying kidneys,
Yep.
are going to be resurrected.
Well,
And
so
especially if there's even repair.
absolutely. And if there's repair. So I think you're right that ultimately the big question that this answers is, what really is death? And it has been when one of your organs or multiple organs have catastrophic failure or they give out. Well, what if they could not only be revived, but they can start the repair process? So what happened was they did this with a dead pig. So using a special mixture of blood and nutrients, the organs of a dead pig can actually be sustained after death. So the pig died of catastrophic heart failure, and then they used a special machine to pump blood and other fluids around the body. And they were actually able to restore cells and organs an hour after death.
The implication is
Ooh.
when you see it happening before death,
Yeah,
that's when you initiate the program, so the organ doesn't actually die.
absolutely.
Exciting stuff.
I know that, when they talk about this, they talk about the benefit for transplant, but I see it substantially differently. I mean, absolutely, yes, for the benefit of transplant, but also if this technology can be used, you're right, for people who are in current organ failure. I think that gives people a second chance or a second life. Of course, you also have to address, a lot of those things are lifestyle related, so you have to address those factors also. But this gives humanity a second chance in a very interesting way, and especially when we were just talking about declining sperm count,
Yes.
we need ways to restore human health, and this might be one of those ways eventually. Okay, the James Webb Telescope arrived at its destination. All right, so the James Webb Telescope, this is also very cool. Let's add it to the stream. Share screen. All right, where are you, James Webb Telescope?
Let me say something about it
Yes, well, I'm finding this.
from a psychology point of view. This has added a dimension of excitement to people around the world.
Mm-hmm.
They're seeing images of galaxies at the edge of the universe, at the edge of the known universe.
Yep.
They're seeing spectacular pictures. They are getting excited about, wow, there's so much going on out there. Science is really cool.
Yes.
And there's that psychological event of it, somehow it piques our curiosity, it inspires us,
Mm-hmm.
and makes us happier to be alive and saying, hoorah.
And how many people didn't want to be an astronaut when they were a kid? I'm
Right,
curious about space.
yeah.
So one of the coolest things about this is that the team from the telescope, from the James Webb Space Telescope, discovered 87 galaxies that may have been the first to appear in the universe about 200 million to 400 million years after the Big Bang. All right, so that's very cool, and it expands what we know about our own existence. One of the biggest questions I think we all have, or very many of us have, is where did we come from? Who are we? And we have surprisingly little information on that.
So, we have none. I mean, come
We
on.
have just about none. It's true. We have just about no information on this. And so
I
in,
found the most inspiring thing of this is that there's some conflicting evidence whether it was a Big Bang or not.
yes, yes.
I mean, we're not going to, in my lifetime, I don't think we're going to know it. But it's so exciting to think, oh, this has gone on forever,
Mhm.
and this existence is going to go on forever. It's always been here and will always be here. Going, okay, okay.
The reason that we included this, other than just frankly how important and cool it is that it does begin to expand the way that we're able to think about that question.
Yeah.
Because we as humanity have kind of been put in this very interesting box. This box of, well, this is history because this is what's taught in school, right? This is our history and this is exactly the way that it was and nothing can ever change and this is just how it is. But the reality is that who shared that history with us, right? And to be in such a narrow box doesn't allow us to explore the vastness of existence. And that question on its own is a bit of a mind trip, but this allows us to expand what we think of ourselves. We talked about this in one of our last episodes, that there is a sense that, oh, humanity is a cancer and humanity is terrible and humanity is destroying the planet and all of this.
Which, by the way, we vehemently disagreed with.
Our systems are causing severe damage to the planet and those systems need to be updated. But humanity itself is capable of great things, including some of the things that are on this list. So looking at this, looking at the James Webb Space Telescope and some of the very cool things that it has already discovered, even though it only got in place this last
I
year.
think July was fine.
I
June
think
or
it was
July was
July.
finally
Yeah,
calibrated.
it's finally calibrated.
So it's been 6-7 months. I mean, wow.
And it gives us the opportunity to really sit with that question and really think about what our place really is in the universe, and that we aren't just this planet. There are actually infinite now 87 more galaxies like ours, and the idea
With hundreds
of
of billions of stars in each one.
with each one,
Mhm.
and planets that could potentially be inhabited with life. We're pretty big alien fans.
At
over
least one of
here.
us is.
At least this one is a pretty interested in extraterrestrials and aliens and all of that. So the idea that science could be proving some of that is really wonderful. Okay. Oh, I wanted to read this quote because it's very beautiful. So an astronomer from the University of Missouri, who was one of the lead authors of this study, am I pronouncing that right? Haojing Yan?
Haojing Yan.
Yes.
It's actually Yun.
Sorry, I apologize if I
Haojing Yan.
butchered that. Haojing Yan said, finding such a large number of galaxies in the early parts of the universe suggests that we might need to revise our previous understanding of galaxy formation. Our finding gives us the first indication that a lot of galaxies could have been formed in the universe much earlier than previously thought. So
we've been around a lot. The galaxy's been around a long time.
Long time.
The universe. Okay.
Okay. So this next one is also very cool, and also a pretty big deal. So that is that brain cells in a petri dish, played the video game Pong. Brain cells.
This is, you hear this, you say, well, that's pretty interesting, but the implication is
Yes.
that any kind of nervous disorders might be repaired by installing new neurons.
Say a little bit more about that as I find.
Let's take movement disorders like Parkinson's disease.
Yeah.
What we have is particular kinds of neurons have been damaged.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have tremors and we have all kinds of other symptoms.
Yeah.
That are a direct result of the motor area of the brain doesn't have enough dopamine, a neurotransmitter called dopamine,
Mm-hmm.
to overcome the damage of these neurons.
Mm-hmm.
Happen to know a whole lot about that. And what we have is the possibility of now synthetically putting new neurons into the parts of the brain that are damaged.
Mm-hmm.
And what we have is evidence that this is starting to happen. That means all manner of brain damage, all the way from traumatic brain injury through uh, damage to the prefrontal cortex to you name it,
Mhm.
we now have a possibility of regenerating the brain. And that's very exciting stuff. Now, granted, it's at the early stages.
It is at the early stages. And so what happened is researchers connected the neurons of human and mice to a computer. And the neurons were made aware of their paddle and that they were making contact with the ball or not.
Mm.
And using electric probes, scientists monitored the activity and responses of the neurons and plotted the results as spikes on a grid. When the spikes get stronger, the more neurons moved a paddle and hit a ball. So they actually effectively played the very simple video game Pong. But remember, this is a bunch of neurons in a dish that are responding to this stimuli.
The amazing thing is that they were able to connect those neurons to machinery that took
Mhm.
action. What does that tell you about what might be coming in terms of artificial intelligence and connected to human beings?
Yeah, I think, and so this actually brings up a bunch of questions because the way that this is at least being presented, and obviously we were not the researchers here, but one of the big questions relates to consciousness and what is consciousness. So these neurons on their own, they took action, right? They were able to learn and they took action. And so it brings into question a very interesting definition of life and a very interesting definition of consciousness. And it asks the question, whose consciousness was it that was playing Pong? Is it its own separate consciousness? Is it the consciousness of the person or mouse who donated these cells?
In
So
your lifetime, this is probably going to be demand an answer. It's
yeah,
knocking on the door of demanding
it's
an answer now,
knocking
but
on
in
the
your
door
lifetime,
now.
it's certainly going to demand an answer,
Yeah.
especially with the interface of the human brain and external devices
Yep.
and a direct connection, which, as we know from Elon Musk, is already with monkeys.
Yes. And
Not to go too far down that
yeah,
path,
not to
because
go too far down that path.
that's a big topic too.
So Brett Kagan, the chief scientific officer at Cortical Labs in Melbourne, Australia, said in a statement, so the question was, can we interact with neurons in a way to harness their inherent intelligence? Whoa. It touches on the fundamental aspect of not only what it means to be human, but what it means to be alive and intelligent at all. And he's right. To process information and be sentient in an ever-changing dynamic world. So I think he summed it up very, very well, what the real implications are of this. And the fact that you can do this is very important information. The fact that nerve cells, the neurons in a dish can actively play a video game, uh, it's important information that we have. Okay, the next one is, this one is just very cool in terms of our history, and that is that there's a perfectly preserved woolly mammoth baby. Let me see if I can grab the picture.
You know, the piece of the information I couldn't get from reading about this was, in the teeth or deep in the bones, is there any living material that could be replicated?
Yeah, so let me find it. All right, where are you, woolly mammoth? 30,000-year-old woolly mammoth. All right, so
We might see woolly mammoths again if that material is there.
Let's see if I can find. Oh, there it is. Here's the picture of this woolly mammoth. So they found this whole fully preserved woolly mammoth in the Yukon tundra when they were mining for gold. So this is just kind of one of those cool scientific findings. It's not like earth changing or world changing, but it does give us a glimpse into our past. So this 30,000-year-old woolly mammoth was basically found in this ice. They wrapped it in a tarp and they took it to the native elders from a tribe that I'm not even going to pretend to try and pronounce. The elders offered it blessing, and they named the mammoth Nun Cho Ga, which means big baby animal in the Han language. And so they did this ceremony with this baby animal, and they are taking it for basically for research to figure out what exactly it was eating at the time? What did the world look like 30,000 years ago? And that might very well give us some insight into what the world can look like going forward. A couple of the findings on here, this one and the last one, if you guys stay to the end, tells us a lot about how the Earth has changed. And I think as the Earth is changing right now, that might be extremely valuable information for us, because the more we understand our past, because like I said, for the most part, we know nothing. We're all here on this planet trying to figure out who we are, what we are, where we came from, and what's going on here. And
Let me give you one example that really
Sure.
stood out to me. Our prehistoric ancestors, like Neanderthals and other cousins, lived in an environment that was about 5% higher in oxygen.
Hmm.
And you say, well, so what? Well, what that means is they had greater stamina.
Yeah.
They could work longer, harder, and more resilient to virtually everything. And so the kind of thinking is that human beings, that's where we came from. And if we had that kind of environment again, we'd be much more productive and healthier as a
Yeah.
species. But because right now we're all oxygen starved. Not that that's the truth, but it's a way of thinking about it and showing how the Earth is changing
Mhm.
impacts those of us who are here now.
Absolutely.
And as it changes going forward, how to prepare for
How
it
to
or
prepare
what to
for it.
expect.
Yep. Because the world has changed a lot. Climate change is something that is talked about a lot right now. Like I said, I'm not a scientist. I don't know what is causing that or what isn't causing that. But I can tell you that there is a lot of discussion that needs to happen about it. And it's one of those narratives that more or less isn't really being allowed to have a broader conversation about it. So if you're very interested in that, dive into some of the other alternative conversations that are being had about it. And it's not to believe something or not to believe something. It's about gathering as much information as you can and making up your own mind about something. It's very easy to get stuck in the headlines of things. And
What are we always devoted to? Trends,
yeah,
patterns. You get enough information, piecing it together, to come up with your own conclusions.
absolutely.
We are certain who owns your life.
It is you.
It's you. It's not the government. It's not us. It's you.
Okay. The next trend is something that I participated in by getting my own AI art done. And that is AI art. It's the rise of AI art. So, what you're looking at right now is actually an AI art piece. So, it's art that's made by artificial intelligence. And if you want to go check out my Instagram, I have some pictures that I did with the AI art, which is very interesting. But AI art has won art competitions, and it's been the focus of exhibits in museums like the MoMA. So AI artwork it's artwork that's basically programmed, right? So the AI artists create the algorithms which create the rules for how the AI analyzes images. So it'll analyze some thousands of images to understand a certain creative process, for example, and then they will generate an image based on that. And so what you're looking at is an image that has been created in that way, and it's beautiful
I think so too.
in its own right. It's very beautiful art. And so that is another question that that we're looking at answering, is like, what really is art? Does art have to be created by a human? Does art have to be created by a living thing? And because AI is programmed by a person, right? So AI can absolutely have bias, for example, because there is a programmer, there is somebody who creates that AI.
And what we're not talking about is all the implications of artificial intelligence. We're restricted because that's a whole series of
It
shows.
is. That is the implications of artificial intelligence is a whole series of shows, which we might do in the near future. Okay, the next one is NASA crashed a spacecraft into an asteroid.
Let's talk about the importance of this.
Yeah.
We've seen the great die-offs over and over again, and we've certainly seen the surface of the moon.
we've certainly seen a lot of movies that also talk about this.
And what we know is that we as a species are probably here because of the last asteroid that hit the planet.
Mhm.
What we don't want is another one to come and take us out for the next evolution of life.
Absolutely.
And so detecting these things long term and then sending missions to them to change their or alter their course so that they don't hit us, think that's important if we want to stay alive?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And we've had some near misses of asteroids coming our
Yeah,
way.
we have.
I
We
think
have.
one was within 2 million miles. That's close, really.
Yeah, it is very close. And so NASA crashed a spacecraft into an asteroid. So let's see what's important about that. So it's NASA's double asteroid redirection test. It's called DART. Was slammed into a small space rock called Dimorphos in late September because they wanted to test what would happen if they slammed something into an asteroid and would it change its trajectory. Within weeks of the impact, the DART team announced that the impact shaved 32 minutes off Dimorph's orbit and its larger companion Didymos at the high range the team at the higher range of the team's pre-launch estimates. So they're now sharing a whole bunch of additional findings, but primarily it worked. And that's the important piece of that. If you slam a spacecraft into an asteroid, it changes its trajectory, hopefully away from the Earth. So they said it's a tremendous success. And
we're celebrating it.
Yes, we're celebrating it. They also took images, which is what you're seeing right now. So the DART spacecraft had a hitchhiker called the Light Italian CubeSat for imaging of asteroids, which is basically a camera. And, and they took these very cool pictures as it slammed into the asteroid. So not only did we get very cool pictures of what it looks like to slam into an asteroid, we also have a way for that to help protect us if an asteroid comes our way. And thankfully, there are people monitoring that. Very grateful for that. Okay, the next one is, and this is the last one, and this is finding ancient DNA. So what happened is that we found 2 million-year-old DNA in Greenland. And again, there it is. Again, this is important for a couple of reasons. So the first is that, what they found, they actually found this DNA in the early 2000s. And they didn't have the technology to analyze it until now. So it got more and more as technology increased in effectiveness. They were able to actually process this DNA. And what they found was that 2 million years ago, the North Pole area was actually very forested. It had, rabbits and forest creatures, and it was a forest landscape, which is extremely different than what it looks like now.
You think there was a polar shift?
I don't know what happened.
It seems likely since what is now frozen because it's so far away from the sun had to have sunlight.
Yeah.
So a different part of the planet was facing the sun.
Right, which is its own very important piece of information, right? So, human beings have a desire for things to stay the same, and we have a very hard time with change. But
especially at this level,
polar
shift,
thinking of something like, what we now know as a frozen tundra used to be a very forested area full of animal and plant life. That goes against everything that we feel like we know and feel certain about. But the only constant in life is change. And so discoveries like this give you, first of all, the understanding that we've been around a long time, or life on this planet has been around a very long time. 500 million years ago is a very, very long time. Like, think of how many generations it would really take to get to 500 million years. So the amount of life that has existed on this planet has existed for a very, very long time. And I hope that this allows you to really expand your mind as to what is possible, and really how cool life can really be. And so this discovery, although it may not be world shattering right now, it does allow you to really think about where we've come from and relate
It
it
points
to
in a
what might be
direction.
happening. Yes.
And well, what are we about? Trends,
Mhm.
patterns. Here's another piece of information. It says climate change can happen. Well, what do you know? It is
It
occurring.
is happening.
And here's where it could go.
Yeah.
So it's not a big argument about is climate change occurring. It has always been changing.
Yeah.
So this is part of a natural process. And we have a whole lot more to learn about it. But
Right.
here it is. This
Including,
is the way of this
yeah,
world.
including, are we contributing to it speeding up? Are we not? Like I said, that's an argument. If you would like to go look at all the sides of it, you are more than welcome. But you're absolutely right that the only constant, even with the planet, is change. And I hope that that brings some very cool flexibility to your mind about all of this and what's possible. All right, well, so that is our top 10. This was kind of an experimental show. You know, we typically do very hard geopolitics, but we wanted to start bringing you guys some important, very impactful things that also help expand your entire view of the world. So thank you for joining us today, and as always, prepare yourself for the changing world order. Till next time, bye for now.